think I'm going to start out, and the question that Chris and I were asked to address is really where real estate and transportation meet. And since I'm back here in Ann Arbor after, as you can do the math, it's about 35 years, and I have been back occasionally in between, I want to talk a little bit about a 35-year-old experiment that we've been running in the state of Oregon. And many of you are familiar, if you're in the real estate or land use business, with the Oregon Land Use Planning System, which is a statewide mandatory comprehensive land use planning system. So every city and every county in the state of Oregon have to have comprehensive land use plans that are consistent with state goals that we're trying to achieve in terms of creating livable communities and a vibrant economy. Within that, when that system was set up 35 years ago, they didn't articulate this very clearly, and they probably didn't think very carefully about how to put the pieces together. But if you think about transportation and land use, transportation systems are essentially the skeleton upon which communities are built. And if you look at the shape of any community almost anywhere in the world, it's defined by the transportation infrastructure, whether that's mass transit or rail or streets and roads and highways. That's the skeleton. And what the Oregon Land Use Planning System from the very beginning, 35 years ago, has required, and it's evolved over that time period, is the integration of transportation and land use planning. So in every one of, well, in all cities over 2,500 in population, they have to have a transportation system plan as part of their land use plan, and their transportation infrastructure has to match up with their zoned land use. And that transportation system plan, for those of you in the room that are familiar with U.S. transportation planning, every state has to have a transportation plan. The local government transportation system plans have to be consistent with the statewide transportation plan that's adopted by the commission that I chair. So we've been practicing this for 35 years. And it is really evident when you visit our state and you see communities large or small that they look very different than lots of communities around the rest of the United States, partially because they have urban growth boundaries, but also if you're really into transportation land use integration, there are other signs of it, like how many curb cuts there are or aren't, and the integration, particularly in the Portland metropolitan area, but also in towns like Corvallis and Eugene and our state capital, Salem, of mass transit services and a variety of mass transit services. So that's the system that we've been practicing. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges, because I think for a lot of other parts of the country, you don't have that basic requirement. But let's assume you want to go that direction. What are some of the challenges that you're going to face? And I think the first is that you need more than plans. You need more than land use plans and transportation plans. You have to have investment, and you particularly have to have investment in the new transportation infrastructure to make and create livable communities, and building a new multimodal transportation system that works for people of all ages, whether they're young people without driver's licenses, old people without driver's licenses, people who for one reason or another can't drive, and people who live in very rural areas, think the UP, and at the same time work in very dense urban areas, think Manhattan. That means that you have to invest in bicycle infrastructure, you have to create complete streets, you have to invest in streetcars, commuter rail, etc. But one of the other things that you have to do, and I think this is incredibly important, if, as your state representative said, you're really going to recreate vibrant communities, people have to have jobs. And in Oregon, for economic development, we're very focused on traded sector jobs. We're not particularly interested in minimum wage jobs at big box retail stores. We think the future of our economy is around things like the big Intel R&D facility. It's around our medical school. It's around a lot of things that aren't big box retail and commercial strip development. And so if you're going to have traded sector, you've got to have freight. And often, all too often in my experience, when we're talking land use and transportation, we're talking about how we all get around as individuals every day. And we aren't thinking about the importance of traded sector industry in our communities and how we're actually going to move goods and services in the communities. And we have to think equally hard about freight infrastructure to move those goods and services as we do about creating these integrated networks that allow people choices in how they move every day.
Well, I'm going to follow up and really just reinforce what Gail has said, and I'm going to put it a little bit differently because my colleagues here at the university, Jonathan Levine just came in, the head of the urban planning department, and Sue loves me, that they love it when I say this, but transportation drives development. That the transportation system we the people select dictates what we as real estate developers can build. And it is by far the most important infrastructure. There are 15 infrastructure categories, transportation's first among equals. And you can prove this very simply by looking at your state cabinet officers, or to take a look at the federal cabinet officers. There's a Secretary of Transportation at the federal level. There is no Secretary of Sewers at the federal level. That's the importance of transportation to a domestic policy and to the domestic economy. Now, what does it drive? What does transportation drive? It drives, as I say, development. What does that all include? When you take a look at it, it is the built environment. The built environment is the real estate that we develop and the infrastructure, including transportation, that supports that real estate. That represents, conservatively, 35% of the assets of the country. By some estimates, it's 50% of the assets. By definition, the largest asset class in the entire economy. And how do we know we're as big as we are? Well, we're very proud of the fact that we've caused 2 of the last 3 downturns, including this one. And the only way we're going to get out of this ditch is if this industry gets out of the ditch. But it requires a different way of thinking now. And that's because the market has changed. And Gail made reference to it. We just heard about it from the state legislative perspective, that the market has changed. That what we're seeing in this downturn is a structural shift in what the market wants. This is not a cyclical downturn. This is not that we've overbuilt a few products that we're going to have to wait 2 or 3 years, a few people are going to go bankrupt, a few banks are going to go down, but then time will cure all. No, we have built the wrong product in the wrong location. That's what's caused this economic collapse. And many of those products are never going to be worth what their replacement value is, assuming the land underneath it is 0. So that's the structural shift that we're dealing with. So where are we going? The thing that we know is that there's tremendous pent-up demand for the opposite of what we've been building in real estate for the last 60 years. What we've been building is what's referred to as drivable suburban. We all know it, low density, isolated, that you get there by car. You have to use your car for virtually everything you do. You have to use your car to go to the bathroom. It is just a factor of life. What the market has now said they want, and there's pent-up demand for it, and it's not for everybody, but it's where the pent-up demand is. It's for walkable urban places. It's what your governor, when she could breathe, when she could have a degree of vision 8 years ago, talked about as far as cool cities. That this kind of demographic that we're looking at is demanding walkable urban development. What that requires is an integrated transportation system. You got to give choice. Yes, the car is still going to be here, no question, but you need to focus on biking. You need to focus on transit, rail transit in particular, and you need to walk, and you need to focus on walkability. Because, quite honestly, if you're not investing in your transit system, in your biking systems, and in your walking systems, that you're going to miss the major infrastructure investment requirement of the 21st century. Not investing in rail transit in particular would be comparable to missing building the freeways back in the 60s. If we hadn't built the